All right. So as you guys are coming in, thanks for being here. What's the weather like up there, Chris? It's actually
It
raining here in Orange County today. So
Oh, we switched because usually it's raining in Vancouver, but it's not raining in Vancouver today. It's beautiful. So yeah, we
so
switched.
yeah, we did a little switcheroo. Yeah, last night
Yeah,
I got woken up with like thunder and lightning and a downpour. So a little weird weather for us today.
yeah.
Um, so all right, we just hit the top of the hour. And then we will get into this. If you guys and gals are watching the recording, and if you have any questions when this all gets done, Kosi will leave his contact information here towards the end. We'll have it at the end so everybody who comes on as we get going can get it. I'll leave my contact information. Obviously, you can also always reach out to the association if you have questions as well. It is being recorded. It'll live in the association's education file, and you guys will all be notified that it's there and available for you. Okay, so 10 o'clock on the nose. We're going to get started. People, we got a tiny bit of housekeeping to do in the beginning anyway. So as people come in, they will start to watch. And as you guys are watching the recordings at home, fantastic. And if you're on Facebook Live and you want to participate and ask questions, somebody from Orange County Realtors will be on and will do their best to see your questions and put them through to us on the Q&A bar. Don't forget, there's a Q&A bar for you guys to ask questions. There's a bar. Just chat, Q&A for us. But if you forget, it's okay. I kind of monitor both. We are living in a Zoom world. So if Stobbs bar, Amazon guys show up or equip falters, we'll figure it out. Don't worry. We're trained, untrained professionals here. We'll know what to do to keep you going. And let's see. Oh, how about a big shout out to our sponsor for this today, for OCR. They are helping to provide this for you today, and that is Stage Today, Sold Tomorrow, right? Your staging company. So for all of your staging needs for you agents in Orange County, Stage Today, Sold Tomorrow. Thank you very much for your support, you guys. All right, so I am happy to have on a great guest. We actually had a mutual friend of me and this guest, I don't know, maybe like 6 months ago. And he came up in this conversation, as did the book at that point that he had just written. And so I've known him for years. Great story, phenomenal mindset. I'm super excited that he'd come and join us today, zooming in all the way from Canada. We have Kosi Stobbs, right?
Thank you.
Did I do it right? Stobbs?
Yeah, you nailed it.
Everyone's always like, how do you say his last name? And I was like, I honestly just call him Kos or Kosi. So I'm pretty sure it's Stobbs, but I never call him by his last name. So, and I don't have a Canadian accent to go along with it. So who knows?
Yeah.
So welcome from Canada, my friend. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. It's an absolute pleasure. It's always fun to connect, Dan, and I feel like that's what this is a chance for us to connect again and have a chat. So it's good to see you.
Thank you too. So the last time we saw each other, we were talking in the back room about this, but last time we actually physically saw each other was in Dubai, like 2.5 years ago. It's like maybe 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, that we were both in Dubai for the World Real Estate Congress thing that FIABC puts on. And we got to spend, it was great. We're on stage, right, for like 20 minutes. Yet they put us up in Dubai for like 7 days, which was pretty phenomenal. So we got to hang out and have dinner at the Burj Khalifa and got to go check out the crazy indoor skiing in the malls and stuff. So that's been way too long since I've seen you. I can't wait till we can actually get together and see each other in person again.
Yeah, no, looking forward to it.
So let's talk real quick a little bit about what it is you do. You have multiple titles.
Yeah.
Right? And I think you even have more than the two that I'm going to mention, but I'm going to ask you first if you can tell us, what exactly does the CEO of Specific Mechanical Systems mean? What is that?
Yeah, so Specific Mechanical Systems is one of the operating companies that I own. And what they do is they work in specialty stainless steel, and they manufacture equipment for the brewing and distilling space. So someone looking to start a brew pub or a distillery, their equipment that they'll put inside that, they would come to us for that equipment. North American made and manufactured. So we work with a lot of entrepreneurs that are looking to build systems, and that company manufactures has manufactured over 1,500 breweries and distilleries worldwide in 15 different countries, and that's kind of the space that they're in. So as the CEO for that company, I'm not involved in the day to day. I'm looking at more what the strategic plan is for the next kind of 5 years out. So what do we plan to be in 5 years, and what are the steps we need to do today to get there? Basically, either what markets we want to be selling in or physical presence themselves, either on the sale or manufacturing side. So that's sort of the kind of at a high level decisions that I make in that role. But to kind of step back is people always ask me, are you a real estate guy or are you a business guy? And I'm kind of both. Realistically speaking, I'm both. I think both work really well together. I buy operating companies. So companies that have been around for at least 20 years that have a minimum of 100 employees, right? Those are kind of the two high level parameters I look for. And there's a reason why I look for companies that have been around for at least 20 years. It's just, it comes down to kind of failure rates of companies, right? So 80% of companies are going to fail in the first year of operation. And then of those that last, another 80% may fail in 5 years. So there's a high failure rate for brand new companies versus a company that's lasted 20 years. If you think it's in a market that's going to last another 10 years, it has a higher likelihood of making it another 10 years if it's already gone 20 years. And for me, I like to buy and hold companies long term, just like I like to buy and hold real estate long term. So I look at operating companies that have been around for a minimum of 20 years that I want to own for the next 20 years, not interested in selling. And then really simply put is once I have the companies, it's a great source of cash flow. And I can use that cash flow to acquire additional real estate assets. And
so let's talk about that, the real estate
yeah,
asset side, right? Because you're
yeah,
both, like you said, right?
yeah,
So let's talk
absolutely.
about and is the Property Owl Investment Solutions what you would consider? I would think
Yeah,
it is. That's your real estate side of it, right?
that's the whole hold co. So that's basically, it holds everything.
Okay.
Holds the businesses, holds the real estate. The Property Owl thing, it's actually interesting, like how that all started. Like just to give you the name Property Owls, I started that company name, let's say over a decade ago. And I had a friend, and this is how I became known as the Property Owl. I'll just give you the story. It's kind of, I had a friend that was on Instagram and was trying to show me stuff on Instagram. And it's like, hey, you could join Instagram. Like, there's all these things I want to show you on Instagram. So I said, okay, yeah, sure. So I set up an account with the intention of just like looking at what he was showing me. And I was like, I don't want to use my real name on my Instagram account. So I just use my company business handle. So I used that Property Owl. And then it went from like being like this thing where I was just watching stuff to I started posting, and then the account got big. And then people, I didn't realize people will call you by your Instagram handle. So I would be
Right.
out and people like, hey, it's the Property Owl. Hey, it's the Property Owl. And then that name of everything that I do, because I own multiple companies with multiple different business names, but that name is the one that sticks out to people as my name. So then people started to call me the Property Owl. And then once you're known as that to people, it just kind of stuck.
100,000 followers, by the way, as of today, it looks like. So I just went back to just see. So you've definitely built a good following there. That's a pretty good number, 130K. Congratulations.
Yeah, I'm pretty unique is the best way to phrase it, right? Unique,
No,
eccentric,
you guys,
bunch of different things.
looking at Kosi and think he's unique or potentially eccentric with the way he looks. Not a chance.
Not even a little bit, right?
So let's talk about the real estate side. So you get the businesses, it gives you cash flow. You can invest in real estate. So let's talk about how you've invested in real estate over the last decade, what your holdings are, been doing, and what that means.
Yeah. So I started at the beginning because I started in real estate. So before I owned businesses, and this is actually interesting for if you're working with clients that have an interest in both. I started in real estate, and I started with one property when I was 21 or 22. Refinanced that to buy a second one, and then saved money and refinanced to buy, more. And by the time I was in my mid-20s, I had about 4 or 5. And then I started to raise capital with friends and family, and and split, and I bought more. And by the time I was 30, I had over 20 properties. I'm 39 now. People say I look a lot younger than I am, but I'm 39. And so there was kind of a couple different step changes. So there was the method of kind of buy and refinance. So anyone who's buying and refinancing property, you can kind of build a certain amount. Then once you get past that, there's a method for, if you're partnering with people, you can buy a lot more. And I got to that stage where I started to partner to buy a lot more. And then but in the back of my head, like my goal was always to own businesses, because I liked the combination of both. I looked at real estate as the best tool on the planet to hold wealth, right? The greatest tool to hold wealth. And I looked at businesses, especially operating companies, as a great tool to build cash and capital, right? So like actual cash in hand. If we talk in terms of like cap rates, you buy a company, if I talk in terms of cap rates for the real estate people, you buy a piece of real estate and it has, a 5% cap rate, let's say on average, 5% cap rate, meaning you're investing $100. If you buy it in cash, you're getting $5 a year, right? If you buy a business, you're usually buying it at a 4 or 5 times multiple. So for that same $100 invested, you'll get $15 to $20 per year. So it's an order of magnitude different. But the difference is fast forward 20 years, people's needs for businesses change. And that business may or may not exist. Like if you look at the 100 biggest companies 100 years ago, most of them don't exist today. Like biggest companies in the world 100 years ago. If you look at the 10 biggest companies today, they're much different than the 10 biggest companies even 10 years ago. And it's because people's interests change. So businesses have to adopt with that. They either adapt or they die because the customer changes. But real estate, 100 years ago, people owned homes. 1,000 years ago, they own homes. Today, they own homes. And 100 years from now, they will own homes. So the people that held their wealth long-term were people that owned businesses and held their wealth generational in real estate. So I would say you go to the downtown of any major city, you'll find that, go to the downtown of a major city, you'll find that the people in the downtown cores, they usually were business owners from 100 years prior that bought up all the real estate in the town, and they've been able to hold it. Their family's wealth has continued. Versus the people that didn't do that, they're out of money, right? Their businesses died. They didn't hold the wealth. They don't have anything. So I look at it more generationally.
That is such a great story. Like, so I have a buddy whose dad made the heating elements for water beds. You guys remember what a water bed is? He made the heating elements for water beds. And then he cashed out of that industry in like the early 80s with a fortune. And he bought 10 buildings in San Francisco. Just like you said, he had a business, he cashed out, he bought 10, they still hold all 10 buildings. How valuable is a water bed heating element today? Exactly. Right? It's absolutely none. But he took that wealth, he put it into buildings. And what have those buildings in San Francisco done in the last 30 years?
Exactly. Right?
Wow.
And that's the fundamental reason. And we talk about what I do and why I do it. So here's what I do and why I do it. I talk a little bit about this in the book, but I had a brother that passed away. This is going back to 2006. He was involved in drugs that ended up costing him his life. And I always he was older than me. And I always felt like if I was the older brother, he'd still be alive today because I'd be able to show him a different path that he could take. And I've always wanted to honor him. And one of the reasons why I do that is because I want to help educate people that are underprivileged, starting in Jamaica, which is where my parents are originally from, and be able to sponsor them to go through school. Right. So that's kind of the bigger picture. Why. Now to get there, it's I look at it and I said, okay, if I want to get there, I want to be Canada's first Black born billionaire. And if I'm not the first, the second, right? And I want to get there in about 10 to 15 years. And in order to get there, I view the method of getting there to be a mix of buying operating companies that I can help grow, and taking the cash flow from those operating companies to reinvest it into real estate and be able to balance off the leverage of the real estate to help those assets grow. And I think the combination of those two are very powerful. And that's kind of been my business model. So it required me between my 20s to my 30s to not just be focused on educating myself around real estate, but also focused on educating myself on operating companies and how they work and finance, right? So I'm very strong in terms of like finance, marketing, and then also on the real estate side and just understanding real estate and real estate markets and how to purchase, whether it's single families. I buy more I buy more multifamily commercial these days, just more so on the commercial side. But I think the having the knowledge of both is really helpful. And I think the conversation around wealth for realtors needs to be a conversation that's had, because it's in the back of everybody's mind. And if realtors start having that conversation around generational wealth with their clients, not just looking at the transaction of, okay, we're buying a home today, but how would this home set you up and your children up, and not just buying the home, but potentially accessing the equity of the home and buying rental property. And I think you can turn a single client doing a single transaction to a client that'll do 3 or 4 transactions. And again, for the same person, you're getting 3 sales. They're not just looking for a home that they're going to buy once and then upgrade in 8 years. They're looking at a home they're going to buy once, then they're looking at a rental property and a second rental property that they can hold. And again, I view it as the single greatest tool for holding wealth. And I haven't talked to anybody that's convinced me otherwise. As much as I own in businesses, nobody's been able to convince me of another tool that's greater at holding generational wealth than real estate.
So you're 29, you've got about 20 houses.
Yeah.
Today you're 39.
Yeah.
On the real estate side, let's talk about what kind of inventory or assets you control in terms of real estate.
It's a lot. And it's funny, when I asked this question today, it's a similar answer. To give you a firm number, I'd have to check with my accountant. I couldn't actually tell you because I don't really count anymore. I stopped counting a while ago. I don't really count. I just look at opportunities, and if they present themselves, and sometimes they present themselves in different ways. So I'm buying a lot more industrial portfolios. And sometimes you take on a portfolio, I'm looking at. I'll tell you a transaction I'm doing right now is a portfolio I'm looking at. And it's across the portfolio. There's about 120 different industrial units across the portfolio. And I'm purchasing it from it's a REIT that I'm buying. I'm not a REIT, but I'm buying it from a REIT. And it's the similar structure to how I buy everything. So, I've got a REIT, they've owned it for a while, they're trying to cash out. And I just look at it as another great opportunity of buying industrial property that I can foresee being around for the next 20, 30 years, pay it down and hold additional assets. So it's, like I said, I stopped counting. It's in the hundreds, but I stopped counting. I don't.
When he says hundreds, guys, that's millions, not thousands. Hundreds of millions. For Kosi here, check him out. It's a great story because you also didn't get any unfair advantages, and that's not right. I don't consider anybody who had help an unfair advantage. It's just an advantage. If you had parents who were able to put you in a good spot, it's an advantage. It's not that it's unfair. But you didn't have a lot of that. Like, you're pretty self-made, right? Let's talk about your childhood. You didn't have that. You didn't have a silver spoon. You barely had a plastic spoon.
Yeah. So my mom was a nanny, right? Working for another family, and my dad kind of worked in the oil industry and was on and off work. So we had things, but we didn't have much. Like, we got to do extracurricular. Like, I got to play soccer, which I'm very grateful for. Never got to play hockey because that equipment was too expensive. So that's kind of like that would explain what my life was like. And then, you know, what my parents gave me was love, and that was kind of irreplaceable. Love and a belief that I could do anything. You're in a country now that anything's possible. You have opportunities that don't exist in Jamaica. So everything is all possible for you. And that sort of mindset or instillment was, I think, critically important to building who I was, because I believed them. And since I believed them, it took the work ethic and just turned it into overdrive. Right. So I'm like, I tell you this right now, there's nobody that's going to outwork me ever. It's
Dude,
not going to
I
happen.
saw that when we were in Dubai. You'd be like, hey, I got to go down and work in the hotel lobby. And I was like, dude, it's like 2:00 in the morning. He's like, yeah, but I got stuff I got to do because of the time zones. We come back for breakfast at 7:00 in the morning. Like
Yeah.
before you were still down there working, like you were just nonstop.
Yeah.
You had to work all the time, even when we were in that work ethic. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah. You can either get things done or you can make excuses. One of the two, right? So if I've got a deadline or a deliverable, my options are to complete it, irrespective of what it takes. If I've got to be up all night, I've got to be up all night. I committed to a timeline, so I have to do it. Or I make excuses as to why. It's actually an interesting story for it's actually related to specific mechanical. It's related to this topic, so I'll kind of divulge in it. Is I had to fly to from Atlanta. I was in the United States. This is just over a year ago. I had to fly from Atlanta to North Carolina to meet with a client that was buying a brew house. It's actually a really cool story. They're called True Colors. And I had to fly for that meeting. We had a meeting first thing in the morning, and I was on the last flight from Atlanta to North Carolina at a connecting flight. The connecting flight was late by about 2 hours. When I landed, the last flight of the night didn't go out. It's 10:00 at night, right? Our meeting is at 9 a.m. So I checked the flights for the next morning, and the soonest flight that would get me there would have me land for a client meeting at 9:30 in the morning. So I've got an option here. I can email them and say, hey, flight's delayed. Let's move our meeting. Can we move our meeting till 9:30, 10 to accommodate me? But I didn't do that. I went and I rented a minivan and I drove from Atlanta to North Carolina in the middle of the night. I started the drive at 10:00 and I got there a couple hours before the meeting, got to the hotel room. The hotel staff was like, I didn't think you were going to be making it because you didn't show up last night. And I said, well, I still need my room. Went to the room, had a quick nap, got prepared, went to the meeting. I was there 10 minutes early. The client was late for the meeting. The client was about 20 minutes late. But the secretary came and said, how did you get here? They told us you didn't show up to the hotel last night. They messaged us. And then I told the story. And you can imagine we got the job. It was us against two other companies, and we got the job. We got the job because of that. I said, we're not going to be late for you. I said, we are going to deliver. How you do anything is how you do everything. And I refuse to make excuses for why I'm going to be late. I'm not going to be late. I'm going to show up on time. Right. So It all kind of fits into, people ask me, how do you do what you do? And I just said, it's the little things that I do consistently every day.
That is awesome. That is awesome. All right. Hey, who froze, me or you?
I think I froze because I can see you well, but I don't see.
And you can hear me. As long as you can hear me, that's
I can
fine.
hear you perfectly. I can see you.
And we've got your audio. We have your audio perfect too. So,
okay.
And the way your picture froze, your mouth isn't even in a funny spot or anything. So it's good when it eventually unfreezes.
Yeah.
Since you can see me, let's talk a little bit about this. Right. And I know you had reached out a little bit when you're going through it, and we're writing, and it's a fun name, everybody. It's the F-bomb with a $sign in it. Broke. Let's get rich.
Yeah.
Right. That's the title. And it's a cool book. It's not like overwhelmingly large from a page count, right? It's not too bad, everybody. Because you wrote it for real estate investors, and we all are like ADHD, so it needs to be short and to the point. But you broke it into two parts, right? When you wrote this book, it's kind of broken into two different sections. So talk about that. What prompted you to write the book? And then your mindset about, hey, there's two different things I want to get across, and I'm separating them from one to two. What kind of brought that whole piece about?
Yeah, there's a couple reasons why I wrote the book. One, and the biggest one, was I just didn't feel like there was something on the market today that really saw the way I saw in terms of building wealth and what's required, right? So that's the number one. And just the understanding that it really doesn't matter what you start from, you can accomplish things, right? Just a matter of how much effort you're going to put in, and also that it doesn't matter what you look like. Like when I've been in rooms where I look very, very different in those rooms compared to everybody else, right? And it's never been a hindrance for me.
Because your hair is actually quite tame today. For those
Yeah,
who don't know,
a lot of times I have
right?
it up in a mohawk, right?
Very tame. A lot of times it is straight up and stiff as a board, right? And
right.
Yeah, so it's
and
tame today.
For me, I just try to be me as I am, in the truest form always. But and I also try to add a lot of value in whatever I do, and I work really hard. And people respect you when you work really hard. When you work extremely hard, people will respect that. People will always respect hard work. Doesn't matter what you look like. And I feel like the path to taking people from where they are and to grow the humans, everybody, mankind, to grow us all, is through understanding wealth. If you understand wealth and building wealth and have a deep understanding of it, you can change your life, your family's life, and everything around that changes. And that's why I wrote the book. It's kind of written from a perspective of, okay, it doesn't matter where you start. Here are the steps you need to take to get to where you can be. I talk with a lot of young people sometimes, and I'll tell them, like, I don't care if you make $10 a week. I want you to save $1. Get in the habit of saving $1, even if you make $10 a week, because when you do make $1,000, you're in a better position to be able to save 100. And a lot of people that don't get those basic wealth principles, they make $1 million, but then they spend 1.2, and fast forward 5 years, they're filing for bankruptcy, even though they were making $1 million a year. It's because they didn't learn on the dollar. They didn't learn on the $10 and being able to save $1 on $10. If they learn that and kind of get their head wrapped around principles, and it's not so hard. It's not like we're not going to the moon here. It's like you make $100, spend 90. Like, it's nothing earth shattering or changing, but a lot of people don't fundamentally understand that. And then we have tools that allow us to go overboard, right? We've got credit cards, lines of credit, and all this great stuff that can let you go overboard. Now, I take on a lot of debt, a ton of debt. I've got more debt than most people by far. But I also understand debt a lot better than most people. And I understand debt ratios very well. And I understand cash and cash on hand. And I've got a lot of cash on hand. So you balance that out of saying, okay, for me, for any of my businesses, they've got a year's worth of cash in them. So if we were to shut down and no more sales come in, there isn't a business I own that couldn't last a year, right? We can go a year without sales, but we also have debt. So that's where you kind of start to understand, okay, as a human being, you need to, if you were to lose your job today, can you last 6 months? Can you last a year? And answering those types of questions and kind of just building up and getting an understanding. Okay, make sure your foundation's right. And then you start coming up with different ideas to make money. And there's a lot of different ways you can make money once you have your base core principles, right? Like yourself, Dan. I know a lot of people that are successful in different areas, right? Different areas, all types, whether it's business, real estate, different types of businesses. And they're all so different, but they're all so focused in what they did. And, there's definitely some really great opportunities.
We've got a question here from somebody on Facebook Live. He said, great points about wealth, with sharing the importance of wealth with clients. With sharing the importance of wealth with clients, what step would you suggest they do first? Create an estate or a trust, find financial resources such as tax professional, financier, advisor, add a sentence to that, or something else?
Yeah, I think the first step is just understanding the benefits of it. because before they're going to go through the details of like, the tax planning and all the rest of it, they need to understand just at a core the benefit, right? And so get them understanding the benefit of holding real estate as an investment, because it's a tremendous benefit. And once they get their head wrapped around that, I think their excitement around that will lead to the other things, and they'll start to find solutions for the other things. And because you've unlocked that for them, and if you can provide them with opportunities that help to meet that goal, it's a much higher likelihood of them purchasing. And it can be something as simple as, saying, hey, I've got other clients who are in similar situations who are starting to build wealth through real estate to help support their families. Is this something that you might be interested in? And then let them, and if they say no, they're not interested, move on. But if they are, a lot of times what I personally like to do is I never, it's funny, as much as I've raised in real estate, I never come out and said to someone, do you want to, and ask them to invest with me in a conversation. I've always allowed them to ask me, but I also always allude to it in conversations in a way that allows them to then be the one that's asking you. And I think and one of the best closing techniques is showing someone an example of someone who's actually accomplished it, right? There's a lot more value there, right? If I even look at Jeff Bezos today, or Elon Musk, any of them today, if they were to go and say, hey, I'm starting a company, $100,000 per person for you to invest in this idea, everyone's going to give him that $100,000, right? But that same person, right? That same person, Jeff Bezos, rewind 30 years before he's had any experience, and he's asking for 100,000, very few people are going to give it to him. Regardless of how good of an idea he says Amazon will be, he struggled to get money. He had to go to hundreds of people to get 20 to buy in. So most people didn't buy in because why? The biggest difference between then and now, we all know it, is experience. Once someone has experience and has seen it work, they're much more likely to take a step. That's the biggest factor.
Track record. Right.
Right. So if you can show clients other people who are doing it and say, hey, I've got other clients that are accomplishing it, that's a very powerful statement. It's extremely powerful, much more powerful than you saying, I think you should buy investment property because it'll help your wealth. People in similar situations that have accomplished it, that's a much more powerful statement. And then you give that powerful statement and then watch their response. They'll come back with something.
Interesting. How we Dubai once, but we first met, say, close to 4 years ago. I was hosting an event in Laguna Hills at the Hills Hotel, and we had about 50 people in attendance. And you rolled in with Sam, who was our mutual friend, and Sam was one of my speakers. And I had a guest speaker who had canceled on me last minute, and Sam said, "Well, Kosi can do it. You should let him on stage. He's got a great message to give to people." And you, like, last minute on the fly said, "Yeah, I'll jump." And you filled that space. And what you talked about there was also building wealth and how to build wealth. And as an agent, your mindset about building wealth and investing in properties and how to share that. And so we've never really talked about this, but I'll let you know that over the years, I keep in touch with people who come to my events and such things, right? And I know 5 or 6 people who at that event did something in their heads that finally resonated. It finally was the aha moment for them, right? I know 5 or 6 people after your message that then began to formulate spreadsheets based off of the one that you shared on stage on the big screen, right? And they begin to formulate their own spreadsheets, and they are now actively investing in real estate to buy wealth. So in case you never knew that your message from 4 years ago resonated with 5 or 6 people who are now doing it and are living exactly what you talked about. Now, you know what happens? We had 500 people in that room, dude.
Yeah, totally.
We had 500 people in that room, and 5 or 6 of them, it resonated with. The other 495 or so, same old thing, not doing it, right? But for those 5 or 6 people, it's changed their lives because they took action and they
Totally.
executed on an idea.
Exactly. Right. And really that's all it comes down to. The principles are there and they've been there for thousands of years, especially on real estate. The principles are there. Now, you may not have been introduced to the principles, but the second you are introduced, it's a matter of whether or not you're willing to do it. And that's what it comes down to. And once you decide that you're going to do it, it happens. But it's a matter of whether you're going to decide, and I mean, really decide you're going to do it, not partially and then, run into one roadblock and you stop. But once you decide you're going to do it, it happens. And that's always been for me on a personal level. It's always been really simple. If I decide I'm going to do something, I'm going. I say there's only two people I'm afraid of in business that I'd be afraid to go up one-on-one with, and I'm very honest about the two people. One is God. The other is myself. They're the only two people I wouldn't want to go, because I know one thing about me is that I don't have a stop, right? So if I'm going up against myself, I'd quit. But as long as I'm not going up against myself, I'm okay. Because I know I may not have the answer today, but I'm going to find the answer. I'm going to build a team that can find the answer, and we're going to get the answer. We're going to get there.
Awesome. Hey, everybody, if you have questions, now time so we can make sure we get to them. We've fallen in the second half of this. I've still got some questions for Kosi as well, but if you have some questions for him about investing or about how to start or about what a spreadsheet looks like or just anything like that, start typing away either in Q&A or chat, please. For those of you who are watching this after the fact, we'll see if we can give you some sort of a resource as we wrap it up to get to. But if you guys have questions, it's always best to ask them. All right, so I'm going to ask like the intro level question is, if I was, since we have a real estate audience here, real estate agents in Orange County, California, where the prices are not the cheapest, unfortunately. Fortunately, if you're getting commissions for selling them. Unfortunately, if you're buying them as investment properties, right?
Yeah.
But how would you suggest an agent start?
So there's two areas. So agents starting in terms of having a conversation with their clients, or investment on their own, or combination.
So I'm gonna go with investment on their own. I'm gonna switch it to that side, because I think a lot of agents sell real estate and don't invest in real estate the way they should. So I'm gonna flip it on that side of the coin, if that's okay.
Yeah. So there's two ends. And I think if you're in kind of high end markets, which LA is one, and then also very similar to Vancouver, right? Vancouver is also a high end market. So in those markets, what I do, if I'm investing in the high end market, I'm generally going in the high end of the high end market and renting like on a furnished basis, where it's a comparable against a hotel versus an actual unit, and I'm getting a much higher rent, right? So I've got a unit in Vancouver that I bought for a condo unit that I bought for $1 million, that I rent for $5,000 a month, as an example, right? So it's kind of getting into, and I've got higher end units that I rent for much higher.
That's literally the same math as here, just so you know. Like we literally closed last Monday on a house for $1 million, and we're renting it for $5 million. It's a house, not a condo, but it's the exact math. 1,000,
exactly, right?
$1 million,
so,
on a
and if you do
$5,000
those
rent right now,
those numbers work really well. Now, if you're not at a stage, if you're starting out, you're not at a stage where you can buy the higher end properties. Most of the real estate I own is not within the city that I live in. And it's kind of getting into that mindset that you don't necessarily have to be able to walk to where your property is. And if you do it in practice, it actually helps you convince your clients as well, because your client may be in a position where they're able to buy a rental property, but now be able to buy in the local market, but maybe they can buy in Phoenix, right? Scottsdale, some other markets that you see that there are potential growth opportunities where the numbers work out better and the purchase prices at a lower price point. So I would say on that end of it, and then just making sure you've got the adequate license to be able to sell them into those markets. But on that end of it, you can open up additional opportunities for the subset of people, especially if you've done it. Like if you've done it, you've got the track record for it. It makes a lot of sense for people in higher end markets to be purchasing in markets that are their price
for
points.
The agent in Orange County, they don't necessarily have to buy county prices. For our neighborhood, everybody, we're talking about, you can go out to the Inland Empire, to Riverside areas, We're talking about you can go down to Phoenix or Scottsdale or
Yeah.
Prescott, right? You can go up to Oregon to places like Bend or whatever. So you can, as an agent in Orange County, getting the gigantic commission checks, take a piece of those and invest it outside of Orange County if it's outside the scope of your budget in other areas too, right?
Mm-hmm.
They could go down to Phoenix. They could go
Yeah.
to Bend. They could go someplace else and invest themselves to start building their own wealth.
I personally believe that especially every agent, I think every person should own that owns a home should buy a piece of rental property for their families. Even if it's just one, I think the wealth that can be additional wealth that can be achieved by that, I think is great. That's a personal, right? It's never going to happen. Very few people, percentage wise, less than 5% of people buy rental properties, right? But I think it's such a tremendous game changer when it comes to wealth because, I've never met anybody who's barring investing in areas that are very like sometimes you get an area that's one specific industry that area or city could go away because, the mill or the whatever is gone. Take those aside. But in cities, I don't know of anyone that's gone, even if they invested in the peak, fast forward 20 years and the property's paid off, it's always in a better position. Right. And then if you get more sophisticated around making sure the numbers work, then you put yourself in even better position to not go through that. But even if the market stays flat, and that's the math that I did when I was 21 and people were telling me not to invest in real estate, the math I did was like, okay, like let's say the properties don't go up in value at all. Right. I'm putting 20% down and then in 25 years, it's paid off and it's money coming in. Even if the price is the same, it's a really good investment.
Yep. I had there's a guy here in Orange County. His name's Neil. He's a broker, a friend of mine. And we were wrapping a month or two ago. And he's like, that building I bought? So we bought this big building in 2006.
Yeah.
Right. And whatever it is, like the real estate gods are watching him. So as soon as he closed on this building in 06, beginning of 07, market crashed.
Yeah.
Right. And so like within 8 months, it was like half of the value. Right. But now you fast forward to 2000. We actually had this conversation in 2020. So you fast forward to 2020, 14 years later ish. And he had a 15-year loan on it.
Yeah.
And he says, you know what? I paid the building off in those course of those 15 years. When I bought it at a high price, it went way down.
Yeah.
But along the way, in these 14 years, I have paid it off now on a 15-year loan. And not only did it go down, but it came back up and then it went way back up.
Yeah.
So even though he timed the market as bad as you could possibly time it.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, he literally couldn't have timed it any worse. Peak to
exactly.
valley. He still has recouped it in spades. He's paid it off. He owns the asset outright now because it was a long-term play for him. Right.
Yeah.
So you don't have to time the market right to be an investor. No. You just have to stick with your investment.
Mm-hmm. And I'm a student of, I'm a student of Warren Buffett on the business side. And then I also think about that when I go into the real estate side. And I always say to myself, if I'm buying it for the reasons why I'm buying it, I'm comfortable with owning it for 20 years. My head goes to 20 years always. It's not like I'm not thinking or more. I'm not thinking a year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. So what it does in between those 2 points in terms of price is a little bit irrelevant, right? But, for my experiences, the first 5 years is not much. 5 to 10 years, it starts to look good. 10 to 15, it starts to look amazing. And then you can just sort of apply that in other areas.
When you got your first house, second house, then the 5s and the 10 houses, how were you buying on cash flow? Were you buying on price? Like what were you using to model whether or not it was a good buy?
Mm-hmm. So on the very first ones, so the very, very first one I just bought because a realtor told me to buy it and she had owned 10 properties. That was literally my math. I contacted 30 realtors. I asked them if they own any investment properties. All of them told me no. One of them had 1 or 2. One of them had 10. The one that had 10, I said, tell me what to do. And I bought exactly. She said, I own 5 units in this complex. I suggest you buy one. So I bought one. First property I looked at, I purchased. Right. And I didn't do any math. I didn't do nothing. No, I just bought because she told me to buy it, and it worked out really well, right? So it worked out really well. And then the second property I bought, I didn't do that, and I got burned. It got into a negative cash flow situation. I was working as an engineer at the time, so I graduated engineer, worked as an engineer at the time. So I could afford it, but it wasn't very good. I ended up having to. This is where I learned about furnished rentals, and I switched it from a standard rental to a furnished rental. I ended up went from losing $400 a month into it to making $600 a month in terms of cash flow. And then I was like, okay, great. Now I'm in a better cash position, and I learned about cash flow. And then at about 5 is when I start to get more sophisticated about it. Cause I said, if I'm going to own a lot of these, if you own 10 properties, then you got 10 roofs, 10 houses, you got 10 house roofs you got to replace every 10 years. And, my income at the time wasn't going to do that. So I said, I got to really sophisticated. So make sure the property pays for itself and all the expenses associated with the property, because I want to own it long-term. And then I got more sophisticated on terms of how I looked at things and making sure that the cash would cover all the maintenance and as well long-term expenditures of the property, and making sure that I'm looking at the different places that I'm investing in and making sure they're markets that I'm comfortable being in for the long term. So my real estate's long term. And then again, same thing with businesses. And I think that when you have a long-term outlook, it's slower in the beginning, but you put yourself in a much stronger position long-term, much stronger. And I'm just going based on, data of, past businesses and how they perform over a long term. Like you do better if you hold it longer. Someone may make like double their money and be happy about that in 2 or 3 years, but they don't realize over 20, they might have multiplied that money by 10.
Right. Yeah. We have a lot of house flippers around here, and they're always like, yeah, I pull about 50 to 75 on a house. And people who are pulling 50 to 75 on a house in 2011, 2012 had to hang on to those houses. They had to put $1 million on each house.
Yeah. So
right?
And I do a lot of
based on what's
renos.
happening.
Yeah. And I do a lot of renovations, but I always renovate and refinance and hold for me personally. Right. Because again, like that model of like, flipping, I look at it like, okay, yeah, you made 50 grand. That's cool. It's awesome. It's lots of money. $50,000 is a lot of money, but to me, it feels like a job more so than an investment. And it's a different style of job. Maybe it pays you well, but you're limited. You become limited in time versus refinancing, keeping it. And now instead of having one, and you say you're doing one a year, after 10 years, you've got 10 and they're all appreciating. And that's pretty sweet.
Yeah.
Versus, 50,000, making $500,000, going 50,000 per year. Right. So the numbers end up being dramatically larger. And I'm a numbers guy. It's an order of magnitude larger. It's dramatically larger if you can hold. Some people can't hold because they need the cash out to go do whatever they need to do, and it puts them in a position that they can't hold. But if you can't hold the numbers, it's a big difference.
And here's the thing for me. I mean, not all real estate agents. A few real estate agents have had a prior career that they have an opportunity to receive a pension.
Mm-hmm.
Common for law enforcement officer or somebody, a firefighter, to then after their or even somebody in the military. Those jobs out there, those should have pensions standing behind them to then stay, and they typically do very well because they're very disciplined because of their prior careers, right? And this is a discipline-oriented career. But other than those guys, most real estate agents don't have a pension plan. Say 90% of real estate agents don't have a pension plan. It's been up to them to either fund their IRAs or their SEPs, right? We don't really have 401ks very much in our industry because of independent contractor status. And so how are they going to retire? I mean, my wife and I, right? We own a brokerage. We get it.
Yeah.
How are we going to retire? There's going to be no pension at the end of this journey for us. So we have very clear that our retirement is in real estate, where the debt has been paid down, where the cash flow is enough that it throws off enough cash flow monthly for us to retire. That is our entire plan, spreadsheets made, charts made for how many houses we need based on to throw off so much cash a month when we're ready to retire. And that's how we are going to fit, because we don't come from an environment, from a job career where there's
Yeah.
any pension available. It's up to us. I mean, I
Mhm.
can't save that much, right? It's hard to save that much because of inflation and everything else. So I need an asset that appreciates
Mhm.
while the cash flows are appreciating too. Rent today is a lot more than it was 10 years ago. So
Yeah,
rent will keep up with the inflation, right? So we're
totally.
using real estate to fund our retirement in the future. I think a lot more agents need to consider finding a way to do that so that they're not slinging houses when they're in their 90s,
Yeah,
right?
and to add to that point, and have a conversation with the 5 that took action, because in my experience with the ones that the real estate agents that start to buy investment properties, they start to sell more houses if they have a plan around it. Because again, their clients, there's a lot of equity in the United States in terms of how much debt is on real estate to how much equity there's a lot of equity. And if you can show them based on your own personal experiences of what you've done, what you've accomplished in investing, you know, that holds a lot of weight for someone making a decision to say, okay, yeah, you've done it. That's great. You know, you're set yourself up. You can have this conversation. How can I get involved and do that as well? And then again, I go back to it. Instead of selling one person one home, you're selling them 2 or 3. And it'd be a significant percentage of people. A lot of people want to invest. If they own a home, they know their home is done, especially if they're homeowners already and they saw what they bought it for 10, 15 years ago and what it's worth now. Even going through the mortgage crisis and coming out of that, so seeing the worst event of the last 100 years and coming out of that, so they know long term that there's a lot of benefits in real estate, and benefits in owning rental real estate. If you can go down that road and buy it for yourself, it's a much easier sell for you to convince your clients to start to do the same. And again, it's always better when you're trying to, any type of business that you're in, and you guys are all running a business, you're all running a business, any business you're in, if you can get that same client and get double or triple the money out of the client, it's much easier to do that than it is to acquire a new client. Right.
Yeah.
And the benefit of that client is if you show that client how to buy 2 or 3, that client will advertise for you, because a lot of people because it's a selling feature for them to talk to their friends. They can brag and say, hey, I worked with this realtor, and because of that, I own multiple pieces of real estate. And then it gets you a warm lead. And as we know, warm leads are 10 times better than cold leads in terms of close rates, referrals.
Yep. Hey, Emily has a question, and it's kind of a big question, so we won't be able to do the entire thing, but
Yeah.
she said, can you please share the spreadsheet principle? So I don't know if there's a principle behind it, but let's talk about if you were just off the cuff, a new investor, and if you were going to have a few line items in a spreadsheet, what would you be paying attention to? What are some of those columns?
Yeah. So it's basically purchase price, how much down payment you need. So calculating out the down payment, all your closing costs associated with the property. So understanding how much cash you need to close on the property. And then, so that's kind of the upfront costs and how much you need down. And then from there, it's what are all your operating costs for the property and what does it rent for? So kind of going through and saying, how much do we pay in taxes every year and how much are all the different, HOA fees or whatever is associated with the property. And then in the end, you're going to have the cash in and your expenses. And when you take the one number, subtract the other number, you want it to be a positive number. And so that's kind of a base principle. And then it's looking at the value of the property over time. And what I like to do is make an assessment. So I say, okay, let's assume that it's going to increase by 3% a year over the next 5 years or 10 years. What does the value end up being 5 to 10 years from now? And you compare the appreciation you get to how much you've paid down the mortgage for the total equity, and you're adding the cash flow to see what your rate of return is on your cash.
That's high level stuff, guys, but this is recorded, so you can go back and watch it again.
And re-listen to it, right? Because I kind of
pause
said a lot of
it,
things.
and pause it.
Right. And I don't, it's
That's a great
but
answer,
yeah,
though. It's just
yeah,
a lot, but it's a good answer. If they just keep pausing and rewinding, they'll get. Let me
yeah.
ask you this, and because this is very subjective, it's very, very arbitrary. You use as a vacancy rate. That's like the one unknown that the whole world gives different
Yeah.
numbers. So I'm just curious what you use.
Yeah. So I try to find the prevailing rate for this city in terms of like the area, and then I multiply by 2, and that's what I use in my calculation.
So that's a super safety number then.
Yeah,
By
exactly. I
multiplying,
try to
you
use
take the
emergent
prevailing
safety. So
rate,
if they
double
say,
it.
okay, it's about 5%, then I use 10. And depending on the city, sometimes, or the state, sometimes it's kind of published by the area, but it's very hard to get. And then if I don't have a number, I just use 10%.
Okay, so 10 is your fallback as
Yeah.
a safety mechanism just in case. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and those are all
But then
good
I
things
also
to
keep
understand,
money
you
in
guys.
contingency. So this is an important one. I also keep money in contingency for every property. And I said that before, like things may happen. I think it's important that you keep money in contingency, and how you calculate that will be different for different people. But property should cash flow, and then top of the cash flow, you should have money in contingency for things like let's say you own the property, and then a major catastrophe happens and the unit's vacant for 6 months, and you budgeted 10%, but now you have 6 months. That's where things like contingency come into play, right? Or interest rates go up dramatically. Right? So that's to me. Let's say interest rates go up by 3%, but rents don't go up equivalent amount. You can calculate what that number is, and say, okay, I want to keep an extra amount in contingency. So what ends up happening is the amount that you're putting down as a down payment, maybe instead of being $50,000, I'm just using 50,000 as a number, you have 50,000 down payment and closing costs, and then you have another 5 to 10,000 in contingency. And what that will do is it will reduce your rate of return, still awesome rates of return, but it'll make you sleep so well at night.
Yep.
Right? Because I sleep well at night. I said I have a lot of debt, but I also sleep well at night because I know every property I own has contingency, because they set it up that way. I know every business I own has contingency. So really, there could be any global financial crisis that happens, and I know my companies and my real estate will be okay. We're not going to run out of money. We'll be fine. And if you own long term, because like I said, I like to own 20 years. If I own for 20 years, that means every 10 years, a major catastrophe will happen. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. It will happen every 10 years. So I need to be prepared for it. Every 10 years, something's going to happen.
Let's see, 10 years ago-ish, subprime meltdown, 2010, right?
Yeah.
10 now, global pandemic.
Yeah.
Right. You go back to 2000, and at least here in Southern California, we are having lots of industry layoffs because of base closures and stuff like that. But yeah, you're right. There's always something's
happening. You don't know what, but it will happen, right?
So awesome. And for those of you who are watching, I know that everybody in Orange County always says, well, properties in Orange County don't cash flow.
Mm-hmm.
You can't invest in property here. That's just not correct.
Yeah, correct.
I will tell you right now that a $1 million home with 20% down equals an $800,000 loan. I'd tell you that at rates today, an $800,000 loan with principal, interest, taxes, insurance is going to run you somewhere around $4,300.
Mm-hmm.
And I can tell you that 6-bedroom, 3.5 bathroom home that cost $1 million will rent for $5,000.
Yeah.
$5,043. That sounds like a $700 a month cash flow to me.
Yeah,
that is living every day. I could find one of those houses on a daily basis here in Orange County. So just know that they are out there. You need to get your own spreadsheet together and do some math and run some numbers. It's a fallacy that doesn't exist. It does exist.
Mm-hmm.
So just for everybody watching, you're like, we can't do that in Orange County. Yes, you can.
Yeah. Well, even people told me they couldn't do it in Vancouver. I've done it in almost every city that you couldn't do it in. Again, it's not common because the thing is, most people don't purchase rental property for the property with the intent to rent it out. So that most people aren't looking for it. And then they just go off of a couple of examples, extreme examples, and say, okay, well, it doesn't exist. It exists. You just have to look for it. And it's amazing. It's like that, when you buy a new car and then you start to see the car everywhere, same thing happens when you start to look for it. You start to see it, right?
And a lot of the houses won't work. But there's
a lot of them won't.
always one that will. I mean, we got,
Exactly.
a couple
Yeah,
thousand
maybe it's
houses
1 in
on the
20, maybe
market.
it's 1 in 30. It doesn't matter. You're not looking for
Yeah.
them all. Not everybody's looking for them all.
Well, man, I appreciate you being here to wrap this up. We've got a lot of comments on here. I know people are going to be going back and watch recordings. I know people are going to go back to the spreadsheet part and pausing and starting and pausing and starting.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for being here. Let me do a little bit of real quick. Again, thank you to Stage Today, Sold Tomorrow, your friendly neighborhood staging company here in Orange County. Thank you for being the sponsor for today's Zoom. Have any questions? The Property Owl, it's The Property Owl, or is it Property Owl on Instagram?
Yeah, it's The Property Owl. Yeah.
There you go. The Property Owl on Instagram. Reach out to Kosi. If you need to get a hold, there's a question in Q&A, so I will get to it. Thank you for pointing that out. I'll get to it real quick. I'll just finish my line of thought here. Okay. If you need to get a hold of me, find me on Instagram as well, by Dan Smith. Answer your questions as well. We'll be doing another one of these next month, April 14th, except it won't be an interview. It'll be one of my quarterly topics. And I'm going to be talking about post-pandemic. What are listing presentations looking like? What are the sellers expecting? What has happened in the last, that at that point it'll be 13 months that we need to change what we're taking our listing presentations or what we've learned. So that's what we'll be over on April the 14th at 10 a.m. Mark your calendars, 10 to 11:30 on that day. And then let's get to this question. Joseph said, what are your thoughts on investing in opportunity zones? We'll end it there and then I'll say goodbye. So opportunity zones, those new fun investing vehicle places, geographic spots. Are you doing anything with those?
No, but just conceptually, I just come down to how I conceptually just look at things. And as long as any market you're investing in has multiple industries in it, that's kind of where I look first. That's where 90% of my decisions are made. Multiple industries, and I see growth in that space over the next 5 to 10 years. I answer yes to those two questions. That's 90% of my problem. Then I start to dig for cash flow.
Interesting though, but it's a Kosi opportunity zone, not a federal government designated opportunity zone. So you have your own criteria, what you think is going to present opportunity. Okay. Mm-hmm. Good question. Hey, everybody. Thank you very much, Kos. Thank you very much for being here. Really appreciate it. Can't wait till we can finally get together and hang out again one of these days in real life. And everybody, thank you very much for being here. Share it with your friends. Let them know the recording is floating around out there, and shoot it to them so they can watch it too. And I will see you guys next month on April 14th. Mm-hmm. See you, everybody.
Bruce, thanks for everything. And feel free, again, reach out. So it's The Property Owl. If you've got any questions, I'm pretty good at responding. May take me a day or two, but I will respond. Feel free to reach out. I'd love to hear about people's journeys and what you're working on and how things are flowing. So love to hear stuff like that and connect with like-minded people. So
awesome. Thank you. Thanks, Kosi. Kosi, take it.
Bye.
Bye-bye.